I hope everybody is doing really well. I hope you are all having a fantastic day. It's great to be here for this Alta New YouTube Live. So thank you so very much for joining me today. It will be fantastic to spend the next, hour or so with you as we play with some stamps and a really cool die that I think you will like a lot. So I'm going to give another minute while folks are jumping on, and I will introduce myself. My name is Sarah Newman, and I do lots of these lives for Altenew. It's always my pleasure to do this. I'm a real Altenew fan, as I suspect many of you are as well. And it's great to see some familiar names jumping in. Hi, Cece. I hope you are doing well today. And will be great to see some other folks, maybe some new Altenewers as well. It's always great to have more people in our unofficial club here in our lives. It's great to see you. Oh, hi, Kathy. Great to see you joining in. It's fantastic when you start to recognize the names and then when you see some new names as well. Hi, Stacy. Hi, Jean from Oregon. You know that's where I'm originally from too. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. So I'm waving to my friend in the Pacific Northwest. Hi, Sue. It's great to see you. It's always a pleasure to see Sue's name come up. So welcome everybody. And Orem is behind the badge with us today. Aloha, Michelle. It's great to see you too. And Orem has already posted what many of us regulars know, that if you share today's live while we are live, then you can be in for a $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. And when you do that, if you would just post down below in the comments that you shared and let us know how you shared. And then Orem can do her magic and select a winner at the end of today's show. So we have the entire time that we're here together for you to do that sharing. So welcome everybody who has jumped in since I've been nattering on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to see you. Okay, so I have a couple of different things that I want to share with you today. I have two floral stamp sets, very different looks. Amazingly, they can be used together. So very different styles, though. I think you'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the stamps and the die, which I love, and I think you'll like too. And then what I'll do is tilt down the camera, and we will get right into crafting. So we're going to start with the first stamp set, which is called Amazing Things. And this is a layering stamp set. You've got a really great big blossom on here. This is measuring, it's about 3 inches. So this is one that's going to be a fantastic focal piece or a great background. And I love stamp sets that give you both options. So you could stamp this all over your background, just the outline if you wanted, and you would have a really gorgeous background. Or of course you can create it as a focal, or you can do a combo of both. So you've got the outline, and then since it is a layering stamp, you would stamp this element, then this one on top, then this one is the third. So that's why this looks a little bit funny. It makes more sense if I can show you on the back of the package that you'd see you stamp this plus this will give you this. And just take a look at that very cool flower. Now, of course, you can stamp all 3 of these elements together as they're meant to be. You can also stamp them differently, and I'll walk you through some of those processes today too. There are also some sentiments on here, really lovely sentiments. Amazing things will happen. You are fabulously perfect. Keep on dreaming. Anything is possible, which I think is a really great sentiment if you've got some graduates in your life. Anybody who's graduating this spring, that would be a perfect sentiment. Then you've also got your tri-folder inside here with some project ideas, really beautiful, very different looks that you can get from this. Here's one of my favorites, this purple one here. I just think that is beautiful. Love it. So this is the first stamp set that we're going to be playing with. The second one I'm going to show you, this is called Exotic Garden, and it's a little hard to see because I was trying to put the stamp back onto the liner and it didn't quite align on there. And I will say, this is my confession, my confession for the evening. When I first saw this, I kind of thought, okay, you know, that's nice. It didn't grab me the way some stamp sets will grab you. And I started working with it, and it has shot straight to the top of my favorites list. And I'll show you why, because there is so much that you can do with this stamp set that you might not think. So it's a big bouquet. This is measuring, I want to say it's over 5 inches, you know, from top to bottom. And of course, the first thing you would think that you would do is color in, stamp it and color it in with your artist markers, colored pencils. You could, with your watercolors, you could do embossing and then paint it in. It goes for lots of different things. There's also other stuff that you can do with it too. We'll explore some of those as well. This is one really good example of something that I hadn't thought of when I first just looked at it, but to do a really nice like resist embossing technique on here, and then maybe do some watercolor on the front. I think you could do some really pretty looks with this. So really, really versatile, maybe more versatile than you would think at first glance if you're me. So that's my confession for the evening. And then the third thing that we're going to be playing with today is the Simply Friend die. And this one is about 3 inches long, as well as the big flower on our first stamp set. So you've got some large elements to play with. And this is going to be a lot of fun to work with. So I'm going to share that with you, a couple of projects that we can do with that. And we'll have a bit of a play. So the other things that I'm going to be using today, you know, I love the Obsidian Black pigment ink. This is my go-to for really great crisp colors. We're going to be playing with that. And for the rest, I'm going to be using the dye inks in lots of different colors, and I'll share those with you as we're stamping. But none of the projects that I'm using today require specific colors. So you can kind of choose whatever it is that you like to play with. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tilt down the camera. If you'll hang in there with me. And we will get to our stamping. So the first thing I want to play with is our Amazing Things stamp set. So I'm going to bring in my Misty for this. It does just make the layering process a little bit easier, a little bit more sure, I should say. And I'm going to get my inks all together, and we're going to be stamping this the way it's supposed to go. And then I'll show you some alternates to that. So I'm going to start with this element here. I'll be stamping this in black, and then I'm going to be stamping the 2 other elements with various shades of pink. And in this case, I'm going to be using Pink Pearl and then a darker shade of that, which is the Coral Bliss. And these two work really nicely together for your layering stamp. So I'm going to start with this big flower here, my outline. And I'm going to pop this down onto my cardstock. Move my magnets around, make sure that that's in place. And I'm using a smooth, sturdy cardstock. Something like the Nina Classic Crest is going to work perfectly for this. And I'm going to ink this up with my Obsidian, which will give me a really nice, crisp look. Okay. When you see this flower, you'll see you could have this as it is. You could color this in with your markers, with your colored pencils, with your watercolors. You could do a black and white combination. You can kind of leave it at this if you want to. So this is a great first step. Okay, I'm just going to clean that off and bring in my second element. So this is the bigger piece. This is going to be my shadow effect. And I'm going to pop this down here. And I like to start with my alignment working in the center. That's usually the best way for me to position things. You can tell that I used this with some blue ink earlier. I did clean it, I promise. And for this, I'm going to start with the lighter of my 2 pinks. So remember, I had the Pink Pearl and I had the slightly darker Coral Bliss. I'm going to start with the pink pearl and ink this up. Sometimes those blue inks just end up staining your stamps. You can still use them. There's no problem with that, but I do find that those blue inks can hang around. Okay, so here we have it with that pink pearl. Now I could stop here as well. I could say this is, 2 layers is great and that's it for me. But I'm going to go ahead and do the 3rd layer. So again, clean this off. And let me get it back onto my liner sheet. And then I'm going to grab the 3rd piece and pop this down. And get that lined up. And just kind of scoot that around to make sure I've got it where I want it to go. And I'll show you a little trick that I have. You may be noticing some of my markers on here, and I'll show you why I've done that. Okay, I'm going to close this up. And now for this one, I'm going to use the Coral Bliss. And ink this. And then pop that down. And so there you can see the 3rd layer on there. So in just 3 fairly quick and easy layers, you've got a really unique, multicolored, very modern style of flower. Now I'm going to show you, before I close this up, I don't know if you can see on my clear acrylic stamp, I have a little dot on here, and I've also got a little black mark. Maybe if I close this up, you can see it a little bit better. You can see where that black line and that black dot are aligning. And I have to tell you that when I was stamping, I found that I got myself turned around really easily with this stamp set. For some reason, I don't think it's the stamp set. I think it's me. Aligning them while I'm sitting and realizing that a lot of folks sit at their craft tables when they're stamping. Generally, I'm standing, but when you have to sit, whether it's because you're filming a video or just because you can't stand for a long periods of time when you're stamping, it is a little bit of a different angle, of course, and it can be trickier to line things up or to figure out which direction things go in. So sometimes it helps to add a permanent marker dot on your clear acrylic stamp, just so that you know where the orientation is, or even to kind of trace along one of the lines on there. And for that, I use one of my artist markers because, of course, they work on non-porous surfaces. So just a little trick, if you ever find yourself, kind of turning the stamp around and around and around trying to align things properly, then that might be a good little cheat for you. So here is my completed and colored flower. Now again, this is 3 inches, so it is actually quite a substantial element. You can use it really easily on the front of your card as a focal. And so here you can see I've over stamped it with one of the sentiments from the stamp set. It's a really nice, big, bold sentiment. It's got a nice scripty font to it, a little bit of curly cues on here, and then also some more sans serif and serif fonts on here. So you have a nice combination of those. And I've just wrapped this side with a little bit of baker's twine, and then I've added some of these sequins. Now, these are the satin gold sequins. I absolutely adore these because not only do you get the standard size, but you get medium size sequins and you get these little baby sequins on here. And it just really makes it so easy to add a little touch to your cards without sort of overwhelming the whole image. But I think it went really nicely with the style of this card. Oh, she's saying, you're saying that you love the font. Yeah, I definitely love the font as well. And I love the mix of the two different fonts on here. So very easy to get a very crisp, classic, modern look on your cards. Now I'm going to show you, I've got another version of this. I stamped it here using the maple yellow ink. So that was my middle layer. I used the black for the outline. I've got maple yellow and also evening gray. So these two as a combination are a lot of fun and maybe a little bit unexpected as well. So I was hesitant to try the gray on top of the yellow, but I think I kind of like it. And I like having basically the same layout of a card. I've got a square card and a horizontal card, but I think you can do a lot of really fun variations on this. Okay, so I want to show you another variation on this same motif. So I'm going to go ahead and get out another piece of cardstock here and get that tacked down. And I'm going to be stamping again with my large flower here. Let me grab my ink. Everything seems to migrate around on my desk while I'm working, so my ink was starting to walk away. Okay, so I'm going to pop that down and ink this up again using my obsidian black. Okay. And then just simply stamp this down. Now again, now that we've seen the process for layering, you probably noticed this would be really easy just to leave it as is. Nothing wrong with that. I think just this black sentiment, or the black flower and then a nice sentiment on there would be really beautiful. But let's try it another way. Okay, so I'm going to pop this back. And then I'm going to grab the middle piece. And here you can see again, I've got my line traced on here and I've got my black dot to mark the bottom. And this just makes it a little bit less fiddly and a little bit less time consuming for me to orient things. Okay, so that's on here. And now I'm going to use, this is where my blue will come in. So I'm going to be using the Caribbean blue or Caribbean blue, depending on how you pronounce it. And this is one of my favorite blues in the Altenew range. This is just like a really nice classic color. And then I'm going to stamp this down. And I think I could actually do this another round. I'm going to add a little bit more. This is the great thing about a MISTI, is that it allows you to do multiples if you don't feel like you quite got it, or if you just want to deepen your color. Okay, so there's my blue. Now what I'm going to do is stop here, and I'm going to let this be my layering process. So remember, we talked about earlier, you can, of course, just let this go as one layer. You can also do it as 2 layers. So if I leave this like so, and I've got that beautiful blue on here, I'm going to call this good. And if I add a sentiment, you can see that I have a really pretty card focal. Now I'll also point out on this one that I turned the flower a different direction. So you can see that just by tilting your flower positioning on here, you can get a really different look as well. Now I will say that when I did this, after I did the stamping, I did some spattering on here, and I used Parrot, which is one of my favorite colors as well. And this is a great one just for some simple spattering. So I've spattered on there. Now when I did that, I made a mask. We've talked about this before. I'm going to grab my little mask, which is a piece that I've stamped onto a piece of scrap paper, placed it down, and then did my spattering so that I wouldn't get it on the flower itself. but there are dies available for the stamp set. So that can also be a nice way to use them if you just cut the flower shape die and then pop that on top. It might make it a little bit easier too. So this is if you are just using the second layer with your stamp. And of course, you can also use just the third layer. And for this card, I've done that. I've stamped the outline with that beautiful crisp obsidian. And then I've added just that last layer with a very, very pale frosty pink. So this way you can get a range between going all of the layers and getting a really beautiful dimensional look. You can do some of the layers, 2 of the layers, or you can do the last layer. So from just this one stamp set, using all very pretty crisp and clean lines and easy color combinations, you can create a lot of different looks. And of course, the sentiments are going to really finish things off. And here again, I've added some of those sequins on there. I've also got some of this embroidery thread as well. And this is the antique gold embroidery thread. Of course, you can use it with some of the stitching dies that Altenew has, and we'll probably take a look at that in a future video. But I like just using it to wrap around the bottom and just to add a little hint of color and shine on here. So super versatile flower stamp. And I think the amazing things is really a very cool set. Lots and lots of different possibilities there. So we're done playing with the flower portion of this, but now we're going to move into looking at some of our exotic garden. We have enchanted gold thread. We have an exotic garden. So let's play with this now. I want to share this with you. And I'm going to again be using my Misty. And I really am excited to show you this because I think you're really going to love the look of this. So you can use this in a lot of different ways. I'm going to turn this one this way. You can get a watercolor look, which we're going to take a look at. You can also get a very crisp and clean look, and we'll take a look at that as well. But we're going to start with our watercolor effect. So I'm going to pop this down right onto my cardstock. And again, I'm using some very smooth cardstock, something comparable to one of the Nina Classic Crest style. You just want something that is going to hold those beautiful crisp lines. Okay, so I've got that down here. And I am going to stamp this with my obsidian black, but not right now. First, I'm going to stamp with a couple of different colors. And for this one, I'm going to be using my Aqualicious, and I'm also going to be using Parrot. Now, when you look at the stamp design, I'll just be using the liner to show you this. You can see that you've got some flowers on here. You've got a nice big blossoms. You've also got, and they're all different kinds of flowers. You've also got some leaves and some branches on here, so you have some greenery as well. So you can try and go for perfect aim. I am not going to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is ink with Parrot. Then I'm going to ink with the Aqualicious, kind of spotlighting certain areas. Then I'm going to use my water mister to add just a bit of water on here. Okay, so all over with my Parrot green. And I'm really making sure to get all of the greenery areas on here. And then I'm going to come back with the Aqualicious and try and hit mostly where the flowers are. Bearing in mind that they are completely different flowers, but that's going to be fine for our purposes. Okay, so I've got all of my stamped inked up here. I'm going to grab my water mister and do a couple of spritzes with this. I don't want it soaking wet, but I do want it wet enough that the colors are going to blend together. Okay, need to press a little bit more here. And there we go. So we have a really pretty watercolor effect. And you can go back if you decide, oh, that's a bit light right here. Maybe I want to add a little bit more green down here. You can do that. Mist again. Just make sure that you're not really flooding it. And that can be just a bit of practice. So there I've got my blue and green watercolor blended effect. I'm going to keep everything in place. I'm going to keep my my paper in place. I'm going to keep my stamp in place, and I'm just going to kind of clean this off a little bit. Set my inks aside. And now what I'm going to do is over stamp. So I've got this in place, I've got my stamp in place, and here's where the obsidian is going to come back in. Because this is a very crisp ink, it's going to give me a really beautiful look when I do some over stamping on here. So I'm inking this up, and I did clean it, you know, briefly. I didn't take it off and wash it off, but I did just take a baby wipe and kind of clean off the excess blue and green. So now I've got my black on here, and I'm going to come over and just stamp this right on top. And then when I lift this off, I've got the blues and the greens showing through, and I also have the black on top, which is just adding a little bit of crispness and extra definition. Now I see there's a little spot right up here that I want to go back and just kind of press to make sure that that's all covered. And voila. Really, really easy process to do, and a great way to get just a slightly different look to your pieces. But you can see as well just how beautiful that design is. So even though all of the flowers are different and would generally be different colors and different shades, you can still use the same color combination on here. So now what I'm going to do is set aside my Misty. Again, I'm just leaving this on here because I'm going to be doing some more stamping with the black for a second card project. But for this one, I just want to point out something that this would be perfect for a focal on your card. It can also be a great background. And this is where I was thinking that our friend die would look really great. So I die cut the friend from cream cardstock, and then I also die cut it from black cardstock because I like to create kind of a shadow effect. And I think you can see this. You can see the black around here. Maybe if I set it down onto my beautiful Altenew craft mat, you can see this even better. So I basically cut two, one from cream, one from black, and I glue them together slightly offset. And then that way, when I pop this on here, I have a little bit of shading on here. And so what I'm going to do is take this and pop it down. Let's see, I've got a little bit of adhesive on here. I'm just going to pop this down right onto the front of this card. And I've also, as you can see, I've also glued on some of those sequins on there, so that's already giving a little touch of shine and sparkle on here. But I think it's just a great way to use that big, beautiful stamp as a background element that still really helps to set the stage for the theme of your card. So a great way to use that, that word. And I just think the sizing of this and the proportion to our big beautiful flowers is just absolutely perfect. It's one of my favorite ways to use this. So this was when I got going with this stamp set, this is when I was like, oh, we can really do a lot of very cool things here. Okay, so I'm going to set this one aside, but I'm going to still keep out my friend die. Now I wanted to create an embossed metallic word. And this is a technique that I use a lot. Probably some of you have seen me do this before. So apologies if it's a repeat, but it's one of my favorites. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of white cardstock, just slightly larger than my word. And I'm going to emboss this entire piece. And then I'm going to die cut from this. So I'm using one of my favorites, the copper embossing powder. So this is Altenew's beautiful, rich copper embossing powder. It is dense and gives you really, really beautiful coverage. So I'm going to be using this. I also need to use my embossing ink pad. Okay, so for this, I'm just putting down a piece of scrap paper here, and I'm going to press my embossing ink directly onto my cardstock. Okay, this works really well with any of your cutting dies, by the way. So now I've got this all inky and sticky. I'm going to pop it inside the fold of my card here and take my embossing powder and just coat it. Just totally cover it. And you don't have to worry about any of this going to waste, because I'm just going to funnel this all right back into my jar. I don't want to waste any of it. So I've just got my folded piece here, and I can funnel that all back in. Okay. And then set that aside, and then I'm going to heat set this. So I'm going to be using my beautiful Altenew craft mat, and I'm just going to grab my heat tool, warm it up a little bit, and then I'm going to heat set this. Okay, now it is very, very hot at this point, so I'm going to be very careful and wait a couple of seconds for it to cool down before I pick it up and show it to you. But this is a super easy way to get a beautiful metallic look on your cardstock. So I can hold it up for you now, and you can see that beautiful, beautiful copper shine on there. Now the next part of the process, of course, wait for this to become totally cool, then pop down your die and send it through your die cutting machine, and you will create a piece that looks just like this. So you have a beautiful copper embossed friend, and this will be a perfect element on the front of the next card that we're going to look at. So I'm going to set this aside. And you do want to keep track of the dot of your eye. I think mine has gone missing, but that's okay. You can also use, of course, one of the sequins to dot that. Okay, so for the next part of this card process, I've got my friend copper embossed and cut out. And now I'm going to grab another piece of cardstock. Now that I've got this here, I know that I want to have my floral motif up here at the top. So I'm just going to position my word friend down here, and then maybe plan for another sentiment right here. So let's see, I'm going to tuck this down with my magnet. Pop this down. And this is still a little bit inky. I'll peel that off and just kind of tack that down. Make sure that it's down in place. And that'll go right about there. That'll still give me enough room. Okay, I can kind of scoot this around here. And then I'll move this out of the way. So that's just for planning purposes. Okay, because I know that I want to get just the top of my cardstock piece. And once again, our old faithful, our obsidian black. I don't think I'm the only one who's obsessed with this black ink pad. This is just, I think, a thing that stampers do. We find a great classic, you know, black or gold embossing powder, and then that is our go-to. So this is my go-to. Okay, so I'm going to stamp this all down here. And then lift, and just look how beautiful that is. Look how beautifully that is stamping. Really crisp, really lovely. See a little bald spot here. So again, what you can do is just come back in, add a little bit more ink, and get a perfect impression. Okay, so I'll just clean off my liner sheet on here. And I know that I want to do some more stamping with this, so again, I'm not going to be too worried about cleaning that off, but I'll just set this to one side. And this is where I can start to play with the rest of the elements on here. So I've got my word friend, and don't forget, I've got all of these great sentiments that are from my first stamp set, so from the Amazing Things stamp set. I have to go back and check that. And here's where I can start to play with this. So let's see, maybe I'm going to grab this one here. And I'll use a block for this. Just our little 2" by 3" block. So this is our dream sentiment. Wake up and be awesome. I'm going to put this down here. And again, just ink this up with black and make sure I've got it going the right way. Let's see, we'll do this, and then we can combine it with anything is possible. Okay, I like this. So I'll just stamp this down here. The sentiments are beautiful, and of course the font is as well. So I've got that. Again, keep my word on here as my positioning, and I'll come back with our little line stamp here that says anything is possible. Make sure I've got that straight. And again, pop this on here. Okay. And then position this one down. So you can mix and match your die cut elements and your stamped sentiments, and just let that big beautiful floral motif be kind of the topper on there. Now for the card that I did, I'm going to clean off all of my, I love this obsidian black so much, but it does end up getting on my hand sometimes when I get going with it. For my original card, I added, of course, a few sequins, of course, some of that beautiful embroidery thread, but you can see how this is all coming together. Now I used a different sentiment on here. So this one is Keep on Dreaming, Friend. I had the dot of my eye for this one. And then, of course, the Anything is Possible down at the bottom. And I really like having the combination of the gold and the copper, so you can always mix your metallics. I really like having that be another feature of the card, especially when you have a really nice classic black and white on the stamp topper on here. Now, you can also play with how much of the top floral motif you want to have showing. Of course, you could trim this down. You could do lots of different effects with it, kind of depending on how you're positioning your message on here. So this is another fun way to put those elements together. And I have one more card project that I want to share with you. Again, this is using our friend die. And this is going to be a favorite technique for me, I think. So I'm going to move these out of the way. And again, grab a piece of my lovely smooth cardstock and make sure I've got it in the right place. it's not gonna matter too much that if I have perfect positioning, or even if I make any mistakes. If I don't have anything, if I have something that's not stamped perfectly, that's going to be fine too. Wait until you see what I'll do with this one. Okay, so again, just stamping this down here with my obsidian black. Okay, I do have a little bit of a bald spot. Let's come back and get that. So I think you can see, just even by looking at this, how fun that would be to color, especially with some of your artist markers and that kind of thing. You could do the whole element if you wanted to, and that would be beautiful. Any of your other coloring mediums too, I think some of the watercolors would just be beautiful to work with as well. So here is my entire motif. Then what I'm going to do is grab my friend die cut, pop it down here. Doesn't really matter which direction it's going. Run it through my die cutting machine, and I will get a piece like this. So this is just a scrap that I had. When you take this out, you're going to have two elements that you can put to use. So this one, you can see here, I've got a kind of indistinguishable pattern. And you can color this, you can leave it black and white. What I'm going to do is grab my scrap paper again. Let's find this here. Not for embossing this time, but just for coloring with. And I'm going to use one of my artist markers. And this one is G702. This is the frayed leaf. The set that I pull from a lot is this one, which is the Green Fields artist marker. So this has 3 really beautiful greens and then the jet black. The jet black is what I use to put the dots on my stamps. But I'm just going to come in with either one of the tips actually, and I'm going to color in just portions of this. Because I now have a really abstract pattern, I can color kind of whichever elements I want to. It just looks like a stripy background at this point. And I'm just using one color, but of course you could combine with several of them if you wanted to. So I'll just add this color in here pretty randomly. Depends on how much you want of the white showing and how bold and colorful you want your friend word to be. So I'm leaving some white spaces and then just really sort of spacing out where I'm putting my color. You can't tell that I've got leaves or flowers on here, so I don't need to worry about accuracy in that respect. Okay, so this was with my green artist marker. And then I've got just a little bit of color and a little bit of contrast on here. Now, don't forget, you also have this scrap, and what you can do, I didn't do anything with it for any of my projects, but what you could do, of course, is keep the innies from your die and glue elements in there. So like the loop that goes in the F and the E and the D, for example. But you could, of course, color around there and have a fun element for another part of your card. But what I did then is die cut a second friend from black and then layered the two of them up together. And I've got just a simple frame die on here. But you can see that this, and spattered background. And the spattering I did, by the way, with the jet black, not with the obsidian because it's a pigment ink. And you need to make a watery wash to do the spattering. And of course, pigment inks have oil, and oil and water don't really work together to make a nice spattering. So for this one, I like to use the jet black. Created a spattered background and then just added that colorful friend on here. Of course, a few more of our sequins on there as well. So this one I thought would be really fun. And a great way to think of some other ways to use your big overall stamp designs. Of course, we think of using them as they come, but there are some other different ways that we can put them to use as well. And this was a sort of happy accident, and one that I think is a lot of fun. Okay, so I have wrapped up pretty much all of the projects that I wanted to share with you today. I'm going to tilt back up the camera so we can see each other again. Here we go. Hope that doesn't make anybody dizzy. Hello again. And I will run through again the stamps and the die that we were playing with today. I saw a couple of people who jumped in and waved and said, oh, I'm running late today, so no problem at all. But I do want to make sure that you know what we were working with so that you can see that. So I just need to quickly gather up all of my parts and pieces that are kind of floating around here so that we can see this more easily. And I will show again all of the cards. We'll just whiz through those. So don't forget, while we are still live, you still have a chance to share the video and pop down in the comments how you shared, and how you shared, and then Orem will be able to work her magic and pull a winner. So $15 to the Altenew store. I know that you can find something. If you can't, you have a bunch of people here with you tonight who can help you with that. Okay, so the stamps that we were working with, first of all, we've got the Amazing Things, those great, big, beautiful flowers that can be used in so many different ways. So don't forget also our beautiful sentiments as well. So that was one of the stamp sets. The other one is still inky and on my Misty, but I've got the liner sheet. You can see this. This is the Exotic Garden, which I have to apologize to the Exotic Garden because at first I thought, okay, you know, that's pretty. But then once I started playing with it, really realized how many cool things you can do with it. And then last but not least, I love the Friend die. There's so much you can do with it. This is going to be a classic in my stamping stash. And Altenew has others with different words. So once I realized how great this one was, I was like, oh, I need that $15 gift certificate. Okay, so I'll whiz again through the cards so we can take another look. Here is our stamped flower if you're stamping it the way it is supposed to be stamped, using different colors of your Altenew die inks. And just take a look. I love the font. I love the message on here. I think it's just really just cheerful and encouraging, as Altenew sentiments often are. Okay, and if you want to do some different variations on that, here it is again with our yellow and gray. And I think the image of me has frozen, so hopefully it's only on my screen. I'll keep on going. Hopefully we can still see this. If you're using just different elements of your stamps, you can also do some different looks using whichever color combos and layering combos you want to. So we've got some of those. And of course, moving to our Exotic Garden, combining it with some of our embossing powder and also with our cutting dies. Okay, I can see that a couple of comments that I have frozen. Can you guys still hear me, by the way? I'm not hearing anybody say that they can hear me. Okay, you can hear me, Cece. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm frozen in what is probably a very unflattering still shot. So apologies for that. But since you can still hear me, then I will hurry up and say a good night to you all, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Sorry for the abrupt ending and the very weird image that's probably on your screen. But I will say that I'm very glad we got through all of the fun stuff. And then we can move on to looking at some of the very fun ways that we can use these products. So again, do be sure and share while we have these few last seconds together, and then I will jump off of your screen. But I will say a big thank you to Orem, as usual, for being here with us tonight and helping us through. And thank you guys all for joining me tonight. It's a pleasure as always. Okay, guys, I will see you again next time. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and take good care. Catch you next time. Bye bye.